Hello, everyone. I'll talk about chapter 4 of the text that we are using in this class, planning your research project. We look up into the first part of this chapter. That's all about research design. And when we talk about research design, we are talking about the general strategy for addressing a research problem or question. And research design includes the procedures the researcher follows. What are the different procedures that the researcher should follow? What is step number 1? What is step number 2? What is step number 3? So forth and so on. And some of the steps can be interchanged. We look at research as a scientific process. So if it is a scientific process, there are what we call specific steps, specific procedures to be followed. Second, the data the researcher collect. What kind of data should the researcher collect? Next, the data analysis the researcher conducts. This data analysis is actually part of the statistical methods. That's the reason why when you're going to take up research, you're going to take up also statistics. Because in writing a research, if there's a quantitative research design, it includes both the research methods and the statistical methods. Without basic knowledge in statistics and even advanced skills in statistics, then the quantitative research design could not be analyzed, could not be interpreted, could not be completed. So with the mixed research design, where it is a combination of quantitative data and qualitative data. Since there are quantitative data, they have to be analyzed through different statistical tools. Simply, we put research design as part of the planning. You're going to plan on what are the procedures to be followed, what kind of data should be collected, and what kind of data analysis should be used. Are you going to use descriptive statistics? Are you going to use inferential statistics? Are you going to use parametric statistics or non-parametric statistics? Planning a general approach. So think broadly about the problem as arising out of a particular area. So remember, the research process starts with the identification of the research problem. So are you studying about people? Are you studying about things? Are you studying about records? Are you studying about thoughts and ideas? Are you studying about dynamics and energy? So each of these is potential unit of analysis. We analyze people, we analyze things, we analyze records, we analyze thought and ideas, we analyze dynamics and energy. Think about the kinds of data you need to address your problem. Do you need or can you find participants? Do you need participants or can you find the participants? That is, at the planning stage, you must be able to identify if you can actually find the participants. Do you have the right equipment and skills? Do you have the different tools to be used? If, for example, you don't have the equipment, then don't make use of that research process. When you talk about such kind of problem, identify what are the materials to be used, what are the instruments to be used. And if they are not available, then you will not be able to collect data. And then the necessary skills. Do you have the skills in pursuing that kind of research? Do you know how to interpret the data and draw conclusions from them? So the interpretation of the data needs statistical skills. So you must have a background in statistics, both descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. because without those, you could not actually draw the appropriate conclusions. And even if that is a qualitative data, you must have the knowledge on how to interpret qualitative data. So with a mixed research design. We look at into research planning, selecting participants, and research methodology. So in there, you see planning, determining the general approach to the study. So what kind of approach are you going to consider? Are you going to consider a quantitative approach? Are you going to consider a qualitative approach? Are you going to consider mixed research design, a combination of quanti or quali? And in that case, are you going to start with a quantitative, then followed by the qualitative? Are you going to start with a qualitative, then followed by the quantitative? Or at the same time, you are going to consider both the quantitative and qualitative data or approaches? May be similar across disciplines. We look at different disciplines. We have social sciences, we have physical sciences, the natural sciences, medical sciences. So we consider that approach across different disciplines. When we look at methodology, the techniques one uses to collect and analyze the data. So what are those different techniques when you collect the data? Are you going to make use of interview? Are you going to make use of observation? Are you going to make use of a questionnaire and distribute that one to the target participants, to the target respondents? Are you going to conduct an experiment so that you can collect the necessary data? Are you going to collect secondary data? Are you going to collect primary data? Are you going to look at different documents, different records for you to collect data? And once you have collected the data, you are going to look at into the analysis. What kind of analysis are you going to consider? Are you going to consider a quantitative analysis, a qualitative analysis, or a mixed design analysis for quanti and quali? Maybe specific to a particular academic discipline. So different disciplines have common methodologies, but there are also differences in terms of the processes, in terms of the methodologies. The nature and role of data in research. So data are pieces of information that help form a bigger picture, and that the data are to be collected scientifically, correctly, because if the data are incorrectly collected, then the analysis, the interpretation, findings of the study, as well as the conclusions and recommendations would not be classified as correct. Why? Because the data are incorrectly collected. Data are transient. What is true at any point in time may not be true at another point in time. That's why when we are going to have a dissertation, a thesis, or maybe a research, we need to have a shorter period of time. Because if that is actually collected long time ago, then the time of the analysis, the data are no longer the same to the way you have collected that data in January or in February. So for example, if you have collected the data in January and you're going to make the analysis for now, and you're talking about attitudes, you're talking about behaviors. So those attitudes and behaviors that were collected, which were collected last January, may not be true for now. It's already November. The behaviors that were collected in January are no longer true for now, because now is November. After 11 months, you do the analysis. And according to this statement, at any point in time, may not be true at another point in time. That is why when we do a certain study, we have to consider the specific duration, not too long, so that the data will still be recent, not in the case that it's no longer correct when you do the analysis and then the interpretation. There is what we call a specific duration. So normally 5 months or within one semester. And then in a thesis, we have scope and limitation. We have a scope and limitation. We have also that part about assumption. Assumption. So under assumption, the researcher would actually look into that statement that the researcher assumes that the data, attitudes, or behaviors do not change over a specific time. And why we're going to have that assumption? So that when we do the analysis, we have that in mind that we assume that those data collected, those behaviors collected, those attitudes collected 5 months ago, 4 months ago, 3 months ago, do not actually change over time. So that's our assumption. We assume that the data that we have collected do not change over specific period of time. Data may be primary or secondary, so you know that one. I will not actually go into the details of primary and secondary. So, but for a review, when we look at into primary data, the data are collected directly from the participants. If I go to my participants directly, I interviewed them, I do observations from them directly, then the data are what we call primary. But if, for example, I want to look at into the age, the specific age brackets, the birth rates, the death rates of people in a certain municipality or in a certain city, but I don't collect that data directly from those people, but I just go to PSA, Philippine Statistics Authority, and then I look at their websites, I collect data from that website, then the data that I have collected are actually secondary data. So planning for data collection. So what data are needed? Where are the data located? How will the data be obtained? What limits will be placed on the nature of acceptable data? You're going to have inclusion and exclusion. What data being collected should be included finally in the analysis, and what are those data that should be excluded or not included in the data analysis? Then how will the data be interpreted? So what kind of interpretation? So we look at into different statistical tools. If they are quantitative, qualitative, we look at into the different research designs in terms of qualitative perspective, and we follow the procedures in there. If the data are both quanti and qualitative and quantitative, it's a mixed data, then we follow also some specifications of the different mixed methods design on how data are to be analyzed, how data are to be interpreted. Linking data and methodology. So when we link data and methodology, we look at into the three major designs, which I mentioned that one at the very beginning of this class and up to the present. We always look at into that perspective: quantitative methods, qualitative methods, and the mixed methods. And of course, you know already what are quanti, what are quali, and what are mixed methods designs, because I repeated that one many times in our class. To determine an approach, first ask yourself of the following questions. What is my purpose? What is the nature of the process? What are the data like? How are the data being collected? How are they collected? How are data analyzed? So what kind of analysis should be done? How are the findings communicated? So looking into this statement, the last bullet there, how are findings communicated? You have to communicate the findings. The findings must be communicated, but where should we communicate the findings of the study? So there is a part there in a thesis about significance of the study. Under the significance of the study, you are going to enumerate in there who are the people that can benefit the findings of your study. What are those different organizations? What are those different companies? What are those different associations that can benefit the findings of the study? You might mention The blah, blah, blah can benefit the findings of the study, but you are going to write also, indicate also in what way they can benefit. It might be principles of the school's division of blah, blah, blah can benefit the findings of the study. But in what way these principles can benefit the findings of the study? If presidents of colleges and universities can benefit the findings of the study, then you have to mention in what way they can benefit the findings of the study. If school superintendents can benefit the findings of your study, you have to mention how these superintendents can benefit the findings of the study. So when you are going to have the communication of the findings, so after you have the findings, you have the conclusions, you have the recommendations, the thesis has been completed already, then you have to go back to your significance of the study. If you mention that teachers of a certain school can benefit the findings of the study, go there and give them a copy of your research. And you're going to tell them that this is the study that you have conducted, and these findings may be or can benefit their own school or their own profession as teachers of that school. If superintendents can benefit the findings of the study, then go to those different superintendents, present your findings, give them a copy so that they can benefit the findings of your study. That's one. And we have also attendance to conferences. So you are going to present those findings in conferences, in conventions, or maybe in trainings. Or maybe the most common for now is on the publication of your study. You're going to publish your study in different journals. So for now, the practice is in refereed journals like Scopus Index journals, Elsevier Index journals, or the Asian Citation Index journals, or any kind of journals. Also consider these issues. Your comfort with the assumptions of the qualitative tradition. So I mentioned already about assumptions, that as a researcher, you have some assumptions of the qualitative data, even in the quantitative data, or in a combination of quanti and qualitative data. The audience of your study, the audience of your study. So who can actually benefit the findings of the study, and even the target respondents could be audience of your study. The nature of the research question, what kind of research question are you going to consider? Because based on the question that you have, based on the specific statement of the problems, and even in the general statement of the problem, we can already identify on whether it is actually a quantitative research design, a qualitative research design, or a mixed research design. Next is on extensiveness of the related literature. So if you remember in the research cycle, the first one is identification of a research problem, identification of a research issue or a need. And then after that, you're going to have the review of related literature. So your review of related literature must be extensive or comprehensive, not only one, not only two, not only three, but hundreds of literature. Because reading literature is not a problem. You just need a strong internet connection, a good site for internet connectivity, and you can actually go around the globe and then read different related literature. The depth of what you want to discover. So what kind of ideas, what kind of things are you going to discover? It's not only a very shallow kind of truth that you are going to discover in your study. It must be something new. It must be something novel. If it is actually an innovation, then maybe the part is existing, but you actually add another feature of what is currently existing in the real world. So you see already what is existing. But you see that something is lacking on what is existing. So you actually add what is in the existing product, what is in the existing stitching strategy, and then you actually add your own strategy or maybe an innovation of what you have actually taught, then that could be part of the so-called innovation techniques. The amount of time you have available for conducting the study. So how much time are you allocating for your study? Because if you don't have time, then basically you could not finish. That is why in making your statement of the problem, you have to consider the acronym SMART: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and then the time bound. That there is actually a certain duration of your study. When will you start and when it could be finished? Next, also consider these issues, the extent to which you are willing to interact with the people in your study, the extent to which you feel comfortable working without much structure, your ability to organize and draw inferences from large body of information. The last one is writing skills. So writing skills is actually very important because you could not write a very good review of related literature, a very good introduction, and all other parts of a thesis if you don't have the writing skills. You have to write sentences, you have to write paragraphs, you have to be coherent from the first paragraph to the second paragraph to the third paragraph, so forth and so on. Paraphrasing is very important, especially in the review of related literature. That's why it is mentioned in there that writing skills is very important. So quantitative versus qualitative research design. So in terms of the purpose, you have their quantitative pursuit of explanations and predictions that in most cases will generalize to other persons or places. So the key word there is that quantitative is all about explanation and prediction. You are going to explain, you are going to predict the phenomenon that you have actually studied. And another keyword is you're going to generalize. If you collect the data from the sample, you're going to generalize what you have found in the sample to the population where the sample is actually taken. And that you are going to make use of hypothesis testing when you do the generalization if there is a quantitative research method. So I repeat for emphasis, if it's a quantitative research design, so you have to do hypothesis testing if you are going to generalize. When we say generalize, that means you collect the data from the sample and what you have found from the sample should be generalized to the population where the sample is actually taken. But you could not actually do that generalization if you don't undergo hypothesis testing. So in hypothesis testing, there is actually part of the statistical methods under inferential statistics. That means you collect data from the sample because the population is so big and you could not afford to collect the data from that big population. So you collect the data from the sample only. And then we have so many sampling designs, which we will be talking later. So that's actually part of the generalization. In terms of qualitative design, seek to better understand a complex situation as is often exploratory in nature. So if quanti is more into explanation and prediction as well as generalization, the quali is actually into exploratory in nature that the researcher has to explore. And in here, generalization is not the focus. The process of making conclusion is not actually the focus. And it's not all about explanation and prediction. When we compare the number of sample units. Quanti has more sample units, has many sample units, but in qualitative, there's only few sample units, and even one can actually be considered, or maybe two can be considered. That's the reason that if you have one respondent, one subject, one participant, then that could be a reason that all the data collected from that one respondent, from that two respondents, could not actually let you generalize where these two are coming from that certain population. So basically, the process of making generalization, the process of making inferences or conclusion could not be considered in a qualitative perspective. It's only all about exploratory in nature. So that's according to purpose. And according to process, we have quantitative design. Methods allow the research to objectively measure the variables of interest. So objectively measure the variables. So each variable, you have an instrument on how to collect the data. Another variable, you have also an instrument on how you collect the data. And those instruments are actually scientifically tested, being validated, and being tested for reliability. And they are actually all examined, being actually verified by experts in the field. For qualitative, it's a holistic and emergent with specific focus design, data collection techniques and interpretations, developing and possibly changing along the way. That at the very start, we could not exactly identify the variables, but during the data collection, that would be the time that, we have actually this kind of variable, then we have another variable. Unlike in a quantitative perspective that there are many specific questions, but in a qualitative perspective, in a qualitative research design, there is only one kind of question, and that from that question, the other questions would follow based on the data collection or whatever being transpired in the data collection. Data collection. So Quanti identify few variables to study and then collect data specifically related to those variables. So we have to limit on the variables that we are going to consider. That is why we have the scope and limitation. So there are many variables out there, but we could not actually have all of those variables in our study because ourselves have limitations in terms of money, effort, and then time. So in our research process, we have the scope, we have to identify, we have to select the most important, the most significant variables, and also those variables within our capability. And that could be taken also from the target population or maybe from the sample of the target population. For qualitative design, the qualitative research operates under the assumption that reality is not easily divided into discrete, measurable variables. So our basic assumption in a qualitative study is that the reality is not actually divisible into discrete variable or into measurable variables. So, and I defined already variables at the very beginning of our class. So, data analysis. So quantitative, of course, we use deductive reasoning, beginning with certain premises and then drawing logical conclusions from them through the use of statistical methods, both inferential and descriptive statistics. The qualitative make considerable use of inductive reasoning. And of course, you have taken logic, you know what is deductive reasoning, and you know what is inductive reasoning. Reporting findings. So in terms of quantitative design, typically reduce their data to summarizing statistics. So we summarize the data in terms of tables, and in the tables, you can find their different descriptive statistics and then inferential statistics. Or maybe in terms of descriptive statistics, you summarize the data in terms of graphs, in terms of figures. Then for qualitative data, often construct interpretive narratives from their data and try to capture the complexity of a particular phenomenon. And all are actually written in text, in terms of sentences, in terms of paragraphs, and all are actually narrated based on the interpretation of the researcher with the data that they have collected. So deciding between quanti and quali, so these are actually the different things to consider. Consider your own comfort level with the assumptions of the qualitative tradition. Number two, consider the nature of your research question. Consider the extensiveness of the related literature. Consider the depth of what you wish to discover. Consider the amount of time you have available for conducting the study. If applicable, consider the extent to which you are willing to interact with the people in your study. So what does it mean when we say extent to which you are willing to interact with the people in your study? So when you collect the data, you just don't go to your target respondents, to your target participants or target subjects, and then directly collect the data. But you have to interact first. You have to get the rapport of your target respondents, of your target subjects, of your target sample units. And when you have the rapport, basically you're going to introduce yourself, that you're the data collector, you're the researcher, and you're going to tell what is your research or all about. You're going to tell why do you conduct that kind of study, what benefits could it offer to the target respondents, to the target participants. And everything must be well explained to them. Because if you are not able to explain to them why do you collect data, what's the purpose, what benefit can they get for that, then you're not able to get the full cooperation of the target respondents. You are not able to interact with them. So basically, you will not get the accurate data that you want to collect from those different people, from those different target respondents, target subjects. Then 7, consider the extent to which you feel comfortable working without much structure. Consider your ability to organize and draw inferences from a large body of information. That means you're going to make use of hypothesis testing if it is quantitative, and then you have to organize that one, meaning present that one in terms of tables, charts, graphs. Then you're going to apply different descriptive statistics, then go to inferential statistics if you collect the data from the sample. However, if you do census, so again, census is the collection of data from all members of the population. It's not from the sample. It's actually from the entire population. So you don't need to apply hypothesis testing, because hypothesis testing can only be used if you collect data from the sample. And the sample is considered representative of the total population. Then 9, consider your writing skills, which I mentioned already a while ago, that here, writing skills is very important to complete a certain research, to complete a certain thesis. So these are the different research methodology. This would be part of the assignment that you are going to consider. So read about action research, case study, content analysis, correlational research design, design-based research, developmental research design, ethnography, then experimental research design. The other one is ex post facto research, grounded theory, historical research, observation study, phenomenological research study, the quasi or the quasi-experimental research design, and then the survey research design. So these are the different common research designs that you are going to read. And then by next meeting, we're going to have a graded recitation for this research designs. So I'll end up to this part for chapter 4. Thank you very much.